The beauty of national parks hides a deadly truth. While millions visit these natural wonders every year, not all return. From mysterious disappearances to horrifying fatalities, these parks are home to some of the most disturbing and unexplained deaths ever recorded. Beneath the serene landscapes lies a dark reality that will send chills down your spine. Prepare for an unsettling journey into the darkest corners of nature. This is 2 hours of the most disturbing deaths at national parks. Garrett Bonkowski and Jessica Bartz were just your average couple, filled with hopes and dreams for the future. They hailed from Peoria, Arizona, and had been planning a big move to Jessica's hometown in Iowa. It was a chance for them to start fresh, explore new opportunities, and build a life together in a place filled with memories from Jessica's childhood. Before they hit the road, Garrett and Jessica spent weeks packing their belongings, sorting through old mementos and saying goodbyes to friends and family. There was an excitement in the air, a sense of anticipation for the adventures ahead. They mapped out their route, planned their stops, and packed their car with everything they would need for the trip. As they drove through the vast expanse of the American Midwest, Garrett and Jessica shared updates and photos of their travels on social media. They gazed upon the towering skyscrapers of Chicago, the Great Plains rolling hills, and the Rocky Mountains' majestic beauty. Each new sight was a reminder of the vastness and diversity of their country, and they felt grateful to be experiencing it together. However, as they moved from home, communication between Garrett and Jessica became less frequent. Text messages went unanswered, phone calls went straight to voicemail, and their social media accounts fell silent. At first, their friends and family chalked it up to spotty cell service or busy schedules, but as days turned into weeks, concern began to grow. Sally Liddicoat, a close friend of Jessica's, was the first to raise the alarm. She had been eagerly following Garrett and Jessica's trip online, but she knew something needed to be fixed when she noticed that they hadn't posted anything in over a week. She contacted Jessica's family, but no one had heard from her or Garrett since they had left Arizona. In Iowa, Jessica's family anxiously awaited their arrival. They had been counting down the days until Garrett and Jessica would pull into their driveway, but their excitement turned to worry as the days passed with no sign of them. Jessica's father, Brian Bartz, contacted the authorities to report his daughter and her boyfriend missing, and the search for Garrett and Jessica began in earnest. Investigators retraced Garrett and Jessica's planned route, scouring surveillance footage, interviewing witnesses, and cross-referencing credit card activity. They searched rest stops, gas stations, and roadside attractions, hoping for any clue leading them to the missing couple. But as the days stretched into months, their efforts yielded little results. Then, just when hope began to fade away, a breakthrough came in the form of a hiker's discovery in the Grand Canyon. The bodies of Garrett and Jessica were found near a remote trail, their car parked nearby, abandoned and forgotten. It was a tragic end to a journey that had begun with so much promise, shocking their communities back home. The news of Garrett and Jessica's disappearance and subsequent death spread quickly, sparking an outpouring of grief and disbelief from friends, family, and strangers alike. Memorials were held, candles were lit, and tributes poured in. But amid the mourning, there were questions about what had happened to Garrett and Jessica, and why their journey had ended in such tragedy. One theory suggested that Garrett and Jessica had simply gotten lost, taken a wrong turn, and ended up in the remote wilderness of the Grand Canyon. However, this explanation seemed unlikely, given that Garrett and Jessica were experienced travelers who had meticulously planned their route before setting out. Another theory floated by authorities was that foul play may have been involved. The remote location of Garrett and Jessica's remains, coupled with the lack of any obvious signs of an accident or natural disaster, led investigators to believe that someone may have been responsible for their disappearance and death. But without any concrete evidence or suspects, this theory remained just that, a theory. As the investigation into Garrett and Jessica's disappearance continued, their families grappled with the harsh reality of their loss. They mourned the lives cut short, the dreams left unfulfilled, and the unanswered questions that would haunt them for years. Ultimately, the story of Garrett Bonkowski and Jessica Bartz was an example of how even the best-laid plans could go awry, and that tragedy can strike when we least expect it. But amid the sadness and uncertainty, there was hope that Garrett and Jessica would be remembered, not for how they died, but for how they lived and for the love and laughter they brought into the world. Christine Susinski had spent decades of her life as an accomplished opera singer, performing in places like Sydney, Venice, and Tokyo. Not only was she a great singer who was sought by many opera houses, Christine was also a multi-instrumentalist, wielding the cello and French horn with impressive skill. However, as she approached her old age, she decided to give it all up and move to Victor, a small town on the southeastern edge of Idaho. There, she learned to fly glider planes and eventually became an instructor, a pursuit that deepened her lifelong love of nature. On June 9, 2018, she embarked on one of her usual trips to the sky, just as she had many times before. Accompanying her in the passenger seat of her non-motorized glider was a friend named David Ross. Just before takeoff, Christine discussed the planned route with her tow pilot, whose name remains unknown. At the time, nothing seemed out of place, and the wind conditions were identified as calm. They even completed the pre-flight duties for the glider together, ensuring that the trip would proceed without any issues. Eventually, the tow pilot and his plane, along with Christine and her glider, took off from a location in Idaho. They soon reached the foothills of Darby Canyon at 11,500 feet above mean sea level, experiencing little lift at that time. Throughout the entire flight, the tow pilot maintained radio communication with Christine as they worked together to find lift and gain sufficient altitude for the glider's release. When they finally reached an altitude of 13,800, Christine then released the glider, leaving the tow pilot to return to the takeoff airport without incident. Kristen was expected to arrive at the scheduled terminal point within an hour of releasing the glider. However, she neither arrived nor attempted to communicate with the front desk to provide an update on her situation. After an hour past the expected arrival time, the front desk manager tried to contact her via radio but received no response despite multiple attempts. He waited for a while, hoping that contact would eventually be made. When none came, the glider was reported overdue, and an alert notice was issued to the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. But just before a full-scale search and rescue effort was launched, the owner of Teton Aviation Center initiated a private search of his own using a helicopter. Guided by Christine's last known cell phone coordinates, the glider was located wedged between Middle and South Teton, above Iceflow Lake, at an altitude of approximately 10,800 feet. Sadly, it was in a wrecked state and appeared to have collided with a ridge along the side of the mountain. The Teton Aviation Center then notified the park authorities of the wreckage location. A search and rescue team subsequently reached the scene, confirming the fatalities of Christine and her passenger. Utilizing a long-line helicopter operation, the remains were recovered and transported to the coroner's office. When the aviation accident report was eventually released, it provided no clear answers, which only deepened the mysteries surrounding the crash. Investigators found no signs of pre-flight mechanical problems or missing structural components. They also claimed that the glider was airworthy, after ascertaining that it was properly assembled and that its record showed it was properly maintained. It was later speculated that Christine might have passed out during the flight, although it was never confirmed by the investigators. 7th, 2012, two friends, Chris Onifer and Steve Romeos, embarked on a backcountry ski trip to Ranger Peak, an 11,355-foot crag located at the northern end of the Teton Range. Both were veteran backcountry skiers. Chris had worked for the Jackson Hole Mountain Resort for years, while Steve was a dedicated blogger who avidly documented his skiing experiences. In the early hours of that Wednesday morning, the two set out on their journey and were expected back at night that same day. However, the two failed to turn up and were presumed to be missing after Chris did not fulfill his plan to pick up his father from Jackson Airport that evening. With Chris and Steve also failing to make any contact with the dispatch center, it became increasingly apparent that something was wrong beyond them just being missing. As midnight approached that same day, park rangers decided to launch a rescue mission. They began by sweeping trailheads popular among backcountry skiers in the park's South District before expanding their efforts to the North District as more information became available. Chris's vehicle was then discovered near the Coulter Bay swim beach just after 12:30 a.m. on Thursday the following day. However, neither Chris nor Steve were found inside the vehicle. Despite a search throughout the night, there were no signs of their whereabouts. As dawn approached on the following morning, A search and rescue contract helicopter was deployed to ramp up the efforts to locate the missing skiers. Barely hours into the resumption of the search, 2 rangers aboard the rescue helicopter spotted an avalanche on a ridge that shapes the northern side of Waterfalls Canyon. Recognizing this as a potential area where Chris and Steve may have become trapped, the helicopter conducted a thorough search of the avalanche debris, using a transceiver suspended below to detect any signals from avalanche beacons. Before long, the transceiver registered 2 beacon hits, suggesting the presence of potentially human beings buried beneath the snow and debris. With the location now determined, a team of 7 rangers was flown back to commence a thorough probe search of the debris. Before noon that day, the lifeless bodies of Chris and Steve were discovered in a couloir on a ridge that comprises the north wall of Waterfalls Canyon. Steve was found approximately 150 feet from the toe of the avalanche, while Chris was located about 1,500 feet above Steve. Their bodies were then carefully removed from a relatively shallow depth within the debris. Initially, they were transported by helicopter to an accessible location, and then transferred by snowmobile to meet the coroner. Investigations into their tragic demise revealed that Chris and Steve were likely ascending with skins on their skis when a sizable soft slab avalanche was triggered, propelling them over 2,000 feet down the couloir. It was further determined that the cause of death was blunt force trauma, indicating that they succumbed instantly upon being struck by the avalanche. In the wake of the skiers' deaths, Steve's family decided to relaunch his blog, which had attracted thousands of visitors before the tragic incident. They meticulously cataloged the hundreds of routes he had documented during his lifetime. These routes included descents in the Tetons, Wind River Mountains, Eastern Sierras, and various locations around the world, such as Antarctica, Canada, Italy, Mexico, New Zealand, and South America. Chris was also fondly remembered as a dedicated professional who positively impacted the lives of many in the park. It was October 14, 1999. Jan Davis, a 60-year-old experienced parachutist, stood atop El Capitan, a 200-foot granite cliff. Along with 4 other base jumpers, she was there to protest the National Park Service's ban on the sport. Base jumping, leaping from fixed points like buildings, cliffs, or bridges with a parachute, is known for its high risks and requires perfect timing to deploy the chute. Yosemite had banned it after multiple fatalities, with 6 deaths reported since 1980. The group's goal was to prove that base jumping could be done safely and challenge the park's strict rules. The plan was simple. Each jumper would land in a designated area, get arrested by waiting rangers, and forfeit their gear, hoping the event would draw public attention to their cause. Jan was no novice. With over 70 jumps in her 16-year career, she was a respected figure in the base jumping community, and the first woman to jump from Angel Falls, the world's tallest waterfall. She often collaborated with her husband, Tom Sanders, a Hollywood stunt photographer on high-profile projects. But this protest was not just another jump for Jan, it was a statement. At 2 p.m., a crowd of about 150 gathered in Yosemite Valley to watch the demonstration. Among them was Tom, ready to film Jan's descent. The first 3 jumpers completed their jumps flawlessly, their parachutes opening smoothly as they glided to the ground. The audience cheered and the mood was celebratory. Then it was Jan's turn. Before the jump, Jan decided to leave her custom-fitted parachute behind to avoid losing it to the rangers. Instead, she borrowed an older parachute, known in the community as a trash bag. The borrowed gear had a ripcord located on the leg, unlike her parachute where the ripcord was on the back. This setup was unfamiliar to Jan, and crucially, the borrowed gear lacked a backup parachute. Jan's jump began smoothly. Witnesses described her exit from the cliff as steady and controlled. But as she descended, it became clear something was wrong. Her parachute didn't open. Cries of, "Pull the chute!" erupted from the crowd below, but nothing happened. For 20 agonizing seconds, she fell until she struck rocks at the base of the cliff. The joyous protest turned into a scene of shock and horror. Tom, who had been filming from below, watched the tragedy unfold through his camera. He slumped over his equipment, devastated. The 5th jumper, scheduled to go next, canceled his jump and hiked down instead. Rangers quickly secured the area, and news of the incident spread globally, casting a shadow over base jumping and its advocates. The tragedy sparked intense debate within the base jumping community. Some blamed the park's policies, arguing that banning the sport forced jumpers to take unnecessary risks, like using inferior equipment. Others criticized the organizers of the protest for allowing John to jump into unfamiliar gear. Experienced jumpers stressed a hard truth: base jumping is inherently dangerous, and personal responsibility is key. Borrowing equipment violated a fundamental rule in the sport, and it cost Jan her life. Online forums like Base Jumping Life Information Network and Communications were flooded with discussions about the incident. Robert Simon, a former Army paratrooper and base jumping pioneer, emphasized that borrowing parachutes was a practice that should never be done. Jan's death left a deep impact on her family and the base jumping community. She was remembered as a trailblazer, a devoted wife, and an adventurer with an unshakable spirit. Her husband Tom later reflected on the moment he realized she was in trouble, noting that her jump appeared clean with no tumbling. But as the trees came into view, it became clear that it was too late to save her. He described the profound loss of his best friend. The protest, meant to show the skill and safety of base jumping, ended as a heartbreaking reminder of the sport's risks. For many, Jan Davis remains a symbol of the balance between adventure and safety, and her story continues to resonate within the base jumping world. It was July 13, 2024. Grace Roloff, a 20-year-old college student, stood on the summit of Half Dome with her father, Jonathan. For Grace, this was a dream come true. The iconic granite formation, towering nearly 5,000 feet above Yosemite Valley, had been a long-time goal. The father-daughter duo, who had hiked countless miles together, shared this unforgettable moment. As they admired the breathtaking views, Grace's face glowed with happiness as she expressed her love for her father. Moments like these gave their outdoor adventures deep meaning. However, the celebration soon turned into a tragedy. They began their descent down the Half Dome cables, a challenging section where hikers hold onto metal cables to navigate steep, slick granite. The day had started with clear skies, but suddenly, a loud thunderclap broke the calm. As black clouds rolled in quickly, Jonathan recognized the danger and told Grace they needed to descend immediately. They hurried, but soon got stuck behind slower hikers. Jonathan, always considerate, decided not to push ahead. As rain started to fall, the granite became dangerously slippery. Grace, wearing new hiking boots, noticed the issue and grew worried as she struggled to maintain her footing. Jonathan encouraged her to stay focused and move cautiously. However, the storm intensified, soaking the cables and turning the surface into a hazard. About 3/4 down the descent, the unthinkable happened. Grace's boots lost traction and she slipped. Jonathan later recalled that Grace simply slid off beside him down the mountain. It happened so quickly that he couldn't stop her. Grace fell about 200 feet, landing outside the cable area. Jonathan rushed down the cables, calling out desperately, but there was no response. He repeatedly told her he was there, that he wouldn't leave her, and expressed his love, but received no reply. Unable to reach her due to the steep terrain, Jonathan called 911 and prayed for a miracle. Other hikers joined him in prayer, witnessing his heartbreak. One hiker, Aaron McGlynn, described it as one of the most emotional and courageous moments she had ever seen. Despite his grief, Jonathan stayed calm, holding on to hope that Grace might still be alive. After 3 long hours, rescuers reached Grace. Sadly, they confirmed she had not survived. A coroner later determined that she likely passed instantly from a severe head injury. While devastated, Jonathan found some comfort in knowing she hadn't suffered. Grace was more than an avid hiker. She was a kind and fearless young woman who brought joy to everyone around her. A student at Arizona State University, she was studying to become a teacher while working 2 jobs to support herself. Her father described her as someone who made everyone feel valued, even the quietest member of her basketball team. Her mother, Astria, remembered her as pure joy, while Grace's cousin, Emily Samora, shared how she had brightened many lives and that they had been planning a camping trip together. Grace's tragic fall is one of many incidents on the Half Dome cables. Since 1948, at least 15 people have lost their lives there, with 6 of these occurring since 2006 due to rain making the surface dangerously slippery. Yosemite now requires permits to limit the number of hikers, but the risks remain. Many hikers, eager to complete the climb, underestimate the dangers, especially during sudden weather changes. Jonathan now describes the climb as unnecessarily risky and plans to work with park officials to improve safety. He suggested adding a second set of cables closer to the ground and wooden planks for better footing. While he acknowledged that these changes wouldn't bring Grace back, he believed that making the climb safer would have been something she would have wanted. Grace's story raises questions about the circumstances of that day. What if they had passed the slower hikers? Could they have avoided the storm? What if Grace hadn't worn new boots? Could better traction have saved her? And what if additional safety measures were already in place? These questions may never have clear answers, but they underline the importance of improving safety in high-risk areas like Half Dome. It was October 8, 2024. Harry Partington, a 22-year-old traveler from Perth, Australia, was hiking along the challenging 4-mile trail. Known for its steep climb and incredible views, the trail is a favorite among experienced hikers. Harry, an outdoor enthusiast, often shared his adventures on social media, keeping friends and family updated with photos of the beautiful places he visited. That day, Harry planned to reach Glacier Point, a spot famous for its panoramic views of Yosemite's landmarks like El Capitan and Half Dome. Unfortunately, his journey ended in a way no one could have anticipated. The 4-mile trail is a strenuous 9.6-mile round trip with a climb of over 3,000 feet. While it offers breathtaking scenery, it's also risky, especially during bad weather. On this particular day, Yosemite was experiencing gusty winds and sporadic rain, making conditions more hazardous. Harry had made it 2/3 of the way up near Union Point, at an elevation of about 6,300 feet, when tragedy struck. At around 2:30 p.m., strong winds caused a large tree to uproot and fall directly onto the trail. Harry, caught in its path, was struck. The sound of the tree falling was described by nearby hikers as deafening. A German woman hiking separately was also hit and suffered serious injuries, requiring immediate airlifting to a hospital. Park authorities were quickly informed, and emergency personnel, including paramedics, firefighters, and search and rescue teams, responded swiftly. Helicopters were deployed to the area to assist. Despite their efforts, Harry did not survive the incident. The accident deeply affected the hiking community. The 4-mile trail, established in 1872, has been a popular yet demanding route for many. It is usually closed during the winter months due to dangerous conditions. While the trail was still officially open on October 8th, the strong winds and rain made it dangerous. Following the incident, park officials closed the trail, and over 30 emergency workers cleared the area while redirecting hikers to safer routes. Witnesses recalled the chaos of the day. Kelly Kennedy Bentley, who was waiting at the trailhead for her family, shared how she felt seeing the rescue teams rushing up the trail. It was a terrifying experience for her, until her husband texted to assure her that they were okay. Harry's death was a devastating loss for his loved ones. In Perth, his close friend Victor Markey paid tribute on social media, reflecting on how Harry's love of travel had taken him farther than anyone could reach, but his memories would stay with them forever. He expressed his sorrow, wishing Harry to rest in peace. Yosemite National Park, while stunning, is known for its dangers. Between 2007 and 2023, over 160 deaths were recorded in the park, with falls being the most common cause. The combination of rugged terrain, steep trails, and unpredictable weather creates a challenging environment even for skilled hikers. The 4-mile trail in particular is classified as strenuous, requiring careful navigation, especially during windy or rainy conditions. The tree that fell on Harry was likely a lodgepole pine, ponderosa, or fir, trees common in Yosemite. Though typically strong, such trees can become vulnerable due to factors like weather or age, making them susceptible to falling during storms. Harry's adventurous spirit and love for nature left an impact on those who knew him. He was not only a passionate hiker, but also an award-winning referee for Australian rules football. His dedication and enthusiasm were admired by many. Friends remember him as someone who inspired others with his sense of adventure and appreciation for the beauty of the natural world. While his passing is a heartbreaking reminder of nature's unpredictability, Harry's memory lives on through the stories and photos he shared. One friend reflected on how life can be unfair, with Harry taken too soon but never forgotten. It was July 21st, 2020, in Calgary, Canada. Vida Smith, a 69-year-old woman known for her skills as a blackjack card counter, met up with her longtime friend and business partner, Kevin Barton, also known as Chris Lee. They had worked together for years, traveling to casinos and making a living from their winnings. But over time, their relationship had become complicated. That day, Vida had arranged to sell Lee a passport she got from her ex-husband. He needed it to bypass casino bans placed on him. The deal was set at $10,000. Lee handed over the money, expecting the passport, but instead, Vida gave him a birth certificate. When she tried to leave with the cash, tensions escalated. Lee later testified that he grabbed Vida to stop her from leaving. During the struggle, he claimed she suddenly became unresponsive. In a panic, he checked for signs of life but found none. Instead of calling for help, he made a drastic choice. He placed her lifeless body in the back of his sport utility vehicle. What started as a business exchange took a tragic turn. In the days that followed, Lee tried to cover his tracks. He abandoned Vida's car at a local business and drove away in his vehicle. For several days, he kept her remains in his sport utility vehicle while trying to figure out his next move. At one point, he thought about escaping into the wilderness but ultimately decided against it. He traveled to Edmonton before returning to Calgary. By July 22nd, Vida had been reported missing. When she didn't return home, concerns grew, and authorities launched an investigation. Soon, suspicion fell on Lee. Surveillance footage confirmed he was the last person to see her. After monitoring him for days, police arrested him. Inside his vehicle, they found Vida's purse, phone, and wallet. Alongside them were 5 loaded firearms, ammunition, and items suggesting he had tried to conceal what happened. Forensic evidence told a troubling story. Traces of Vida's blood were found in Lee's sport utility vehicle, and her deoxyribonucleic acid was discovered on a pair of handcuffs. Investigators determined that she had struggled inside the vehicle before losing consciousness. Despite Lee's claims that it was unintentional, the evidence suggested otherwise. Lee was charged and later admitted in court that he was responsible for Vida's death, though he insisted he never meant for it to happen. In 2023, he was convicted of manslaughter. However, one major question remained. Where was Vida's body? For nearly 3 years, Vida's family searched for answers. Eventually, Lee led authorities to a rest stop along the Trans-Canada Highway in Banff National Park, claiming that was where he had left her remains. However, due to harsh weather and rough terrain, the search was difficult. It wasn't until 2023 that authorities finally recovered Vida's remains at the rest stop, a place frequently visited by travelers and cyclists. For her family, it was a moment of both relief and heartbreak. Vida's daughter, Netta Power, expressed her pain in court, saying that Lee treated her mother as if she meant nothing. Her words reflected the deep loss they had endured. Vida and Lee had built a partnership in the gambling world, but as the years went on, trust eroded. Financial struggles, the pressures of the pandemic, and Lee's attempt to develop a cheating device for casinos only made things worse. What had once been a close friendship turned into a series of betrayals, ultimately ending in tragedy. For Vida's family, the path to justice was long and painful. Lee's efforts to mislead authorities and hide evidence only added to their suffering. While his conviction provided some closure, it couldn't undo the damage he had caused. During the trial, prosecutors presented key evidence that contradicted Lee's claims of an accident. His attempts to clean his car, dispose of crucial items, and avoid authorities showed that he was trying to escape responsibility. His history as a professional gambler and his repeated bans from casinos added more layers to the case. What happened to Vida Smith raises unsettling questions about trust, deception, and greed. If Lee had simply walked away that day, would things have ended differently? Was their partnership already beyond repair, or did that single moment seal Vida's fate? As Lee serves his sentence, Vida's family continues to grieve. The discovery of her remains brought long-awaited answers, but it didn't take away the pain of knowing that someone she once trusted had betrayed her in the worst way possible. It was October 5, 2022, in the Canadian Rockies. November 11, 2020, when Patrick Madura entered the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The morning was cool and the forest was alive with the sounds of wildlife. Patrick, a 43-year-old man from Elgin, Illinois, was an avid hiker and camper with a deep love for the outdoors. He had traveled to this national park many times before, drawn by its beauty and tranquility. This trip, however, would be his last. Patrick had set up camp at Campsite 82 in the remote Hazel Creek area. This part of the park was known for its seclusion and natural beauty, making it a favorite among experienced backpackers. The area is dense with trees, and the creek winds its way through the landscape, adding a serene touch to the rugged terrain. Around mid-morning, a group of backpackers trekking through Hazel Creek noticed something unusual. They spotted an unoccupied tent at Campsite 82. At first, they thought nothing of it. It wasn't uncommon for campers to leave their tents while exploring the surrounding area. But as they continued their hike, they made a grisly discovery on the other side of the creek. What appeared to be human remains were scattered near the water's edge, and a large black bear weighing about 240 pounds was scavenging on the remains. The backpackers quickly realized the severity of the situation and reported their findings to park authorities. Park law enforcement rangers and wildlife officers responded swiftly. When they arrived at the scene, they observed the bear still actively scavenging on the remains. Given the danger posed by the bear, the rangers decided to euthanize it immediately. The area was then secured, and Campsite 82, along with the Hazel Creek Trail, was closed to the public. The remains were later identified as those of Patrick Madura. The chief medical examiner of North Carolina conducted an autopsy to determine the cause of death. The findings were harrowing. Patrick's body showed multiple puncture wounds consistent with bear claws and bite marks. Some of these wounds showed signs of hemorrhage, indicating they were inflicted before he died. His scalp, finger, back, and lower extremities all bore lacerations. Additionally, he had fractured ribs with hemorrhage in the surrounding muscle and a similar injury to his left lung, all suggesting that the injuries occurred while he was still alive. The autopsy took almost a year to complete, and the final report confirmed that Patrick Madura likely died due to trauma caused by a bear attack. The manner of death was ruled an accident. The report also noted that Patrick's heart, lungs, and brain showed no evidence of significant natural disease, further supporting the conclusion that his death resulted from the bear attack. This tragic incident marked the second bear-related fatality in the history of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The park, known for its stunning scenery and diverse wildlife, is home to an estimated 1,500 black bears. These animals are a symbol of the Smokies, but they are also dangerous wild animals. Their behavior can be unpredictable, and attacks on humans, though rare, can be fatal. Bill Stiver, the supervisory wildlife biologist for the park, emphasized the inherent risks associated with hiking and camping in bear country. Black bears are the largest predator in the park, and although rare, attacks on humans have occurred, inflicting serious injury and death, he stated. Stiver also reiterated the importance of taking necessary precautions while in bear country, including hiking in groups of 3 or more, carrying bear spray, complying with all backcountry closures, properly following food storage regulations, and remaining at a safe viewing distance from bears at all times. Patrick's death serves as a horrifying example of the dangers that can be present in the wilderness. Despite his experience and knowledge of the outdoors, he fell victim to one of nature's most powerful predators. The park takes active measures to prevent human-bear conflicts, such as providing aerial storage cables for backpackers to hang their gear and food, educating visitors on how to respond if a bear is encountered, and closing backcountry campsites when bear activity is reportedly high in a given area. But even with these precautions, the wilderness remains unpredictable. If attacked by a black bear, rangers strongly recommend fighting back with any object available. People should attempt to look large, not run or turn away from the bear, and remember that the bear may view them as prey. On November 24, 2020, before 1:40 p.m., Wesley Brandon Stedham arrived at the Chimney Tops Overlook along Newfound Gap Road in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The day was clear, and the autumn air was crisp. 48-year-old Brandon, as he was known by his friends and family, had a deep appreciation for nature and loved exploring new places. This passion had brought him to the Great Smoky Mountains, a place renowned for its stunning vistas and beauty. Brandon lived in Warrior, Alabama, and was a well-known figure in his community. He was particularly passionate about high school football and was heavily involved in the local sports scene. He served as a radio announcer for Hayden High School Wildcats games, a role he took great pride in. His friends and colleagues described him as larger than life, always full of energy and enthusiasm. On this fateful day, however, his love for photography and the outdoors would lead to a tragic accident. As Brandon stood at the Chimney Tops Overlook, he decided to step down a steep slope below the overlook to get a better angle for a photograph. The Chimney Tops Overlook, located along the busy Newfound Gap Road, is one of the park's most popular spots, offering breathtaking views of the surrounding mountains. However, the terrain can be treacherous with steep slopes and loose rocks. Brandon carefully made his way down the slope, trying to find the perfect spot for his photo, but as he descended, he lost his footing. The ground beneath him gave way and he fell approximately 50 feet down the steep embankment. The fall was catastrophic, and he suffered severe head trauma as a result. Witnesses quickly called for help, and park rangers were dispatched to the scene. The park rangers, along with members of the park's technical search and rescue team, arrived at the chimney top's overlook shortly after receiving the call. They quickly assessed the situation and realized that reaching Brandon would be a challenging task. The steep slope and rugged terrain made a direct approach impossible. They decided to use a rope and pulley system to safely descend to Brandon's location. The rescuers worked swiftly, setting up the ropes and carefully making their way down the slope. When they reached Brandon, it was clear that his injuries were severe. Despite their best efforts to provide medical assistance, Brandon had already succumbed to his injuries. The rescuers secured his body and began the difficult process of bringing him back up to the overlook. Back in Warrior, Alabama, the news of Brandon's death spread quickly. His friends, family, and the community were in shock. Robert Bradford, a fellow sports announcer and close friend of Brandon, was particularly devastated. Bradford recalled the first time he met Brandon 5 years earlier at a Hayden Wildcats game. Their friendship had grown strong over the years, and they spoke almost every day. The sudden loss of his friend was a heavy blow. Bradford described Brandon as a man who was always full of life, someone who loved his family and friends deeply and enjoyed every moment to the fullest. He was a fixture at Hayden High School football games, both home and away, and his voice had become synonymous with the Wildcats' Friday night games. Brandon's enthusiasm for the game and his dedication to the students he cheered on were unmatched. The head football coach at Hayden High School, Keith Register, also spoke about the impact Brandon had on the team and the community. He noted that Brandon's presence in the booth, both at home and on the road, would be sorely missed. Brandon had a unique way of connecting with the listeners and making them feel a part of the game no matter where they were. His loss left a void that would be difficult to fill. The community rallied together to honor Brandon's memory. A tribute was planned for him at an upcoming Hayden Wildcats game, a fitting gesture for a man who had given so much to the sport and the school. Friends and family shared stories and memories of Brandon, remembering his larger-than-life personality and his unwavering love for those around him. On January 22, 1977, Michael and Charlotte Sherman went from Texas to California. Michael, a recent dental school graduate, had enlisted in the U.S. Air Force and was relocating for a new assignment. Charlotte, his wife and a dedicated elementary school teacher, accompanied him. After spending the night in Flagstaff, Arizona, the Shermans set off early the following day, eager to explore the Grand Canyon. They arrived at the South Rim entrance between 9:30 and 9:45 a.m., venturing into the park's expansive landscape. The couple decided to venture along the less-traveled West Rim Drive to experience the canyon's breathtaking views away from the crowds. Powell Point was their destination, a scenic overlook known for its panoramic views. As the Shermans gazed at the natural wonders surrounding them, tragedy struck. Just after 11 a.m., their bodies were discovered behind the Powell Memorial. Both had been shot, the apparent victims of a robbery gone wrong. Michael's wallet and Charlotte's purse were missing, suggesting a motive for the crime. Despite the presence of other visitors in the area, no witnesses observed the attack, leaving investigators with few leads. The only clues were reports of a couple matching the description of the assailants seen driving a light-colored station wagon. Law enforcement officials launched an extensive investigation, but the case soon grew cold. Over the years, various theories emerged, ranging from opportunistic robbery to targeted violence. Some speculated that the Shermans may have stumbled upon illicit activity, while others believed they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. In 2008, an experienced investigator, Joe Sumner, joined the Coconino County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit, reigniting interest in the mystery. Sumner and his team revisited the evidence, hoping that advances in forensic technology could provide new leads. In 2013, investigators traveled to Georgia to interview potential suspects who matched the description provided by witnesses. Despite their efforts, breakthroughs were not made, not leaving the case at a standstill. The discovery of DNA evidence at the crime scene raised hopes of a resolution, but subsequent analysis failed to gather any matches in law enforcement databases. The identity of the perpetrator remained a mystery, leaving Michael and Charlotte's loved ones grappling with unanswered questions and unresolved grief. As the years passed, the passage of time only deepened the sense of loss for those left behind. Michael's parents, who had hoped to see justice served in their son's murder, passed away without closure. Charlotte's students, deprived of their beloved teacher, grew up without knowing the truth behind her untimely death. Despite the challenges and setbacks, Sumner and his team remained committed to solving the case, determined to bring closure to the victims' families. The mystery of what happened to Michael and Charlotte Sherman continues to haunt the Grand Canyon National Park, sprawling countless questions among people that may never be answered. It was around 11:43 p.m. on November 17, 2021, when a 2019 Ford Fiesta was driving southbound on the spur between Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The night was dark, and the narrow, winding roads of the park were a significant challenge for drivers. This particular stretch of road was notorious for its sharp turns and lack of adequate lighting, making it a dangerous route, especially at night. The car, driven by 22-year-old Victoria Dellaway, was traveling near the Gumstand Road intersection when Victoria lost control of the vehicle. In an instant, the car veered off the road, crashing into the river that runs alongside the spur. The impact was severe, and the vehicle quickly became submerged in the cold waters of the Little Pigeon River. Inside the car, Rebecca Hamby, also 22 and from Sevierville, was seated in the front passenger seat. The force of the crash and the subsequent submersion of the vehicle left her with fatal injuries. Emergency responders, including park rangers, Gatlinburg Police and Fire Departments, and the Pigeon Forge Police Department, arrived at the scene swiftly. Despite their efforts to rescue the occupants, Rebecca did not survive. Her body was recovered from the submerged vehicle, marking a tragic end to what should have been a routine drive. Victoria Dellaway was found injured but alive. She was promptly transported by ambulance to LeConte Medical Center in Sevierville, Tennessee for treatment. The specifics of her injuries and her condition at the hospital were not disclosed. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park is known as the most visited national park in the United States, attracting millions of visitors every year. However, the park's roadways can be risky. The narrow, winding paths, combined with limited night lighting, make driving at night especially dangerous. This unfortunate incident highlights the risks associated with driving in such conditions. The investigation into the crash is ongoing, with park rangers working alongside the Tennessee Highway Patrol to determine the exact cause of the accident. There are many questions yet to be answered. What caused Victoria to lose control of the vehicle? Was it a momentary lapse in concentration, a mechanical failure, or perhaps an external factor like an animal on the road? The investigation aims to provide clarity on these points, but for now the answers remain elusive. This tragic event underscores the need for caution when driving through the park, especially at night. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park, with its stunning views and rich biodiversity, offers much to those who visit. However, it also demands respect for its challenging terrain and the potential dangers that come with it. Rebecca Hamby's death is a sign of the risks inherent in even the most routine activities. Driving, something many of us do daily without much thought, can turn deadly in a split second. This incident is an example of how quickly things can go wrong, especially in environments that are inherently more dangerous, like the narrow, winding roads of a national park at night.
Monday, September 14, 2015, a group of 7 hikers set out to explore Keyhole Canyon in Zion National Park, which by the usual estimates should take anywhere from 1 to 4 hours. The group consisted of adults between 40 and 50 years of age, most of whom were California residents. According to reports, their names were Mark McKenzie, Linda Arthur, her husband Steve, Gary Favela, Muku Reynolds, Robin Broom, and Don Teichner. Some of them had taken a canyoneering skills course prior to the hike, as they were newbies to the hobby. Others knew each other through a hiking club in Valencia, California. Together, they weren't the best team, but they had enough experience to get them through the hike on any typical day. However, that seemingly ordinary day in September held something else in stock for the hikers. Just 2 hours past noon, authorities were forced to shut down all the canyons in the vicinity following an unforeseen storm that triggered flash floods. Despite park rangers routinely cautioning hikers about the dangers of floods during monsoon season, this group had defiantly chosen to venture into the canyon. Although the reason behind their decision remains unclear, it might have stemmed from the fact that the Keyhole Canyon permits were coveted by many, as only 80 visitors are allowed to visit it per day. When the storm hit, the hikers were unaware of the flash flooding it had caused. This is because Keystone Canyon is predominantly desert terrain, and there was no means of reaching them in time to warn them ahead. Unfortunately, they ended up getting caught in an unexpected deluge of floodwaters, while they were descending the canyon. It likely rushed over their heads in moments and carried them miles downstream to their watery demise. Perhaps the group's dire situation might never have been known if not for three other hikers who had crossed paths with them earlier during their own hike. At this chance encounter, they helped the group capture a photograph of themselves that would tragically mark the final image they would ever share. The three hikers, who had narrowly escaped being met by the flash floods, alerted the park rangers about the 7 hikers when they arrived back at base. With this crucial information at hand, the rangers moved to locate the hikers' vehicles to confirm if they were able to make it back. However, when the rangers arrived at their location, their owners were nowhere in sight. Typically, a search and rescue operation would have been mobilized immediately to locate the missing hikers. However, initiating one at the time was deemed too dangerous due to the storm. Hours later, search and rescue teams, aided by specially trained dogs, combed through several miles of the area. They searched for any sign of the hikers, be it their remains or any indications that one of them had managed to survive the ordeal. The former ended up being the case. Across 1 week, the bodies of each of the 7 hikers popped up in different locations within the canyon, confirming that the flash flood had indeed claimed their lives. The news devastated their families as well as local hiking communities, which some of them belonged to. Several months later, a memorial bench was erected at Topanga State Park to honor the memory of the hikers who lost their lives in the tragic incident. It's 2022. Jital Agnahatri decided to visit Zion National Park with 2 of her friends for a hiking trip in the Narrows. She loved spending her time outdoors, but could not do it frequently due to her hectic life as a promising young PhD researcher at the University of Arizona Department of Hydrology and Atmospheric Sciences. All things considered, she saw the hiking trip as a time to relax from the stress of academia before starting the fall semester at the University of Arizona. However, just as Jital and her friends were gearing up to start their hike, Zion Park officials issued several flash flood warnings. Given that hiking through the Narrows involved wading through the virgin riverbed at certain points, the prospect of being caught in the river during a flash flood was potentially life-threatening. Regardless, Jital decided to go on the hike as planned. Meanwhile, her friends chose the wiser option of staying back, and they all planned to meet up at the visitor center's parking lot later in the evening. During the hike, the flash flood struck suddenly, turning the dry washes and smooth rock surfaces of the Narrows into a dangerous river of fast-moving water and debris in just minutes. Sadly, Jital, who reportedly couldn't swim, was swept away by the flood, along with a group of other hikers. Shortly after the flash flood, park rangers were informed about hikers being swept away. They promptly organized a rescue team to assist them. One injured hiker was discovered downstream, several hundred yards away on the Virgin River, and was immediately transported to the hospital. Several other hikers found themselves stranded on elevated ground surrounded by water, but were safely escorted to dry land once the water levels went back. The rangers then interviewed the park visitors, asking if anyone was missing from their group. When no one offered information about a missing person, they believed everyone had been located. However, hours later, Jital was reported missing, likely by her friends, when she failed to appear. This triggered an immediate search effort involving a team of swiftwater-trained rescuers, search dogs, and over 170 emergency responders. On the first day of the search, Jital remained unaccounted for. As the search efforts continued, Jital's family, who had traveled to assist in the search, anxiously awaited any updates regarding her whereabouts. Her brother even spoke with news outlets, expressing his shock at the suddenness of the flash floods and lamenting the family's anguish over not knowing what Jital was experiencing. On that same day, video footage circulated by a news outlet showed at least 2 individuals desperately clinging to broken-off parts of fallen trees as the flash flood carried them away. One of the individuals looked like Jital, although the video could not 100% confirm this. When Jital's brother was interviewed about it, He expressed deep concern that the chilling footage may have captured his sister's final moments. The search continued into the second day, with rescue officers carefully going through the areas where Jital might have been swept away by the flood. They focused their efforts on investigating the fast-flowing and deep sections of the river, as well as areas with dense vegetation and log jams. However, it wasn't until the fourth day of the search that Jital was finally discovered. She was found 6 miles south of the Narrows, already deceased, a grim reality later confirmed by a medical examiner. In the wake of Jital's passing, an outpouring of tributes flooded in to honor her memory. Her university described her as gracious, humble, and dedicated, while a close friend fondly remembered her as the most wonderful person and praised her kindness towards everyone. A funeral service was later held for Jital on Thursday, August 25, 2022, at Metcalf Mortuary in St. George, Utah.
Gary Falk was a family man with a wife and 2 young sons, working for the Exum Mountain Guides, an organization that leads groups to the summit of Grand Teton. For over 12 years, Gary dedicated himself to his job and was known to spend summers in the park's Jackson Hole and winters in the San Juan Mountains of southwest Colorado, guiding other explorers as a part-time job for another organization named Mountain Trip. On July 23, 2016, Gary went on a routine climb to the summit with a group of students from a program called City Kids. During the upward journey, they encountered no issues, successfully reaching the summit as planned. But just as they began their descent down the mountain, something happened. According to reports, the downward journey required that each person use a friction descending device known as an ATC. However, Gary realized that he had no ATC to himself due to a last-minute rearrangement of climbing teams from his company. Instead of seeking assistance from his company, Gary chose a more risky approach to solve a problem. He planned to use a belay rope to recover a dropped ATC device that a chaperone had lost. Unfortunately, when the chaperone rappelled down to retrieve the ATC, both the device and the rope became stuck in a crevice during their ascent to the summit. Despite the setback, Gary remained determined to solve the problem himself. He attempted to dislodge the jammed rope and ATC by flipping them within the crevice. Tragically, during this attempt, Gary suddenly fell a harrowing 2,400 feet to the unforgiving rock face below. The group he was with then contacted Teton Interagency Dispatch to report his fall, while still shocked and devastated by the incident. Immediately, park rangers launched a reconnaissance flight with a helicopter to assess the scene. 2 rangers then rappelled down and hiked to reach Gary's location. Upon their arrival at the place where Gary fell, they determined that he was already deceased and needed no medical attention, then began arrangements to recover his body, and they eventually used a helicopter long line to do so. Meanwhile, another Exum guide helped Gary's clients down the mountain to safety. It's believed that while Gary was attempting to free the stuck equipment, he leaned out from the rock face, putting tension on his self-belay tether, known as a lanyard, which was securely anchored to his rappel rope. Unfortunately, the tubular webbing which Gary had tied into a loop with a water knot to tether himself to the anchor came untied, resulting in his tragic fall. This theory was supported by shreds of evidence obtained by the climbing rangers who retrieved Gary's body. They had found the webbing still attached to Gary's harness with a hitch knot, but its 2 ends were not tied together as they needed to form a tether. In the wake of Gary's death, Wyoming's Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, launched an investigation into the safety practices of Exum Mountain Guides. While OSHA determined the company wasn't directly responsible for Gary's death as he used his personal gear, they did identify violations of safety regulations. Specifically, OSHA cited Exum Mountain Guides for failing to ensure the adequacy and proper maintenance of employee-provided safety equipment and maintain a written plan to limit guides' exposure to bloodborne pathogens during first aid procedures. As a consequence of these violations, OSHA imposed a $7,350 fine and mandated compliance with the aforementioned safety regulations. Gary was laid to rest days after the coroner officially certified that he was deceased. A GoFundMe campaign was later established to support his wife and children, raising nearly $200,000 to help them cater to their needs. Knot Mountain is one of the many spots in Grand Teton National Park where many hiking enthusiasts typically visit. Among those drawn to its challenge were Tyler Strandberg, Catherine Nix, and Rebecca Anderson, three friends with a shared love for hiking and outdoor sports activities. On August 22, 2015, they attempted the hike of this 12,300-foot natural structure, known to be the sixth tallest peak in the Teton Range. According to reports, the trio were not novices to climbing and had tackled several other mountain areas in the past. When they began their hike via Tiwanaku's east face without using ropes, they likely felt confident and untroubled about potential incidents. It was also known that the area they chose to climb was rated a 4.0 on the scale of difficulty. This rating indicates that, while good route-finding skills, mountaineering experience, and caution are necessary, the area is not considered highly technical by the park authorities. However, as the trio climbed the mountain, they lost sight of the official trail, a common issue for many who had previously taken this route. They soon found themselves far off course in a much more technical and dangerous area. As they attempted to navigate back to the correct trail, the unexpected happened. Tyler and Catherine slipped off a ledge and plummeted 200 feet. Rebecca, left behind in a confused and panicked state, was also unable to continue her journey either up or down because she was stuck on her own precarious ledge. After a while, she then took the initiative to contact the emergency dispatch center using her cell phone, which she still had with her. She informed them of the incident, explaining how she had tried calling out to her friends but received no response, which led her to fear that the worst had happened. Following the report, 3 rangers were dispatched via short haul to the location where Tyler and Catherine were believed to have fallen. Upon arrival, they discovered that the worst had indeed happened, as Rebecca had feared. Tyler and Catherine were found unresponsive, lying on the hard rock with their bodies severely mangled up. It was evident that they had lost their lives upon impact. After consulting with the park medical director, the rangers pronounced them dead at the scene. With nothing more that could be done for Tyler and Catherine, the rangers shifted their focus to rescuing Rebecca, who was still trapped on a ledge. 2 of the 3 rangers who responded to the call climbed steep and technical terrain for about an hour to reach her at 11,300 feet. Once they reached Rebecca, they prepared her for evacuation, and she was eventually short-hauled with one of the rangers to safety. Meanwhile, the remaining ranger rappelled down to meet his colleague, where the bodies of Tyler and Catherine lay. Their bodies were later evacuated to the coroner's office and subsequently picked up by their loved ones. It was later revealed that climbing the mountain had been one of Catherine's bucket list items for the summer, before she planned to move to New York in September to pursue a doctorate in child psychology at Pace University. Tragically, this adventure turned out to be the last item she would attempt on that list, resulting in the loss of both her life and that of her friend Tyler. In mourning their loss, Catherine's family paid tribute to her in various ways. Her brother honored her memory by running in her place in the New York City Marathon just months after the accident. Additionally, a friend completed the 100-mile Leadville Trail Run, a race in which Catherine and Tyler had previously participated. On July 14, 2014, Mary Margaret Beaulieu joined a guided climbing party for a hike to the summit of the Grand Teton, which stands at an impressive 13,700 feet. The team was made up of Mary, her climbing partner, and a skilled guide from Jackson Hole Mountain Guides. They embarked on their journey in the early morning hours to ensure they had ample time to cover the required distance and reach their destination safely. Given that Mary and her partner were accompanied by a professional guide, it seemed unlikely that they would encounter any significant obstacles along the way. However, just a few hours into the hike, Mary experienced an unexpected accident. As she was negotiating a short section of the climb below the upper saddle, at an elevation of 13,116 feet, she lost her footing and fell off the trail, plummeting to the bottom of the saddle. The climbing party immediately contacted the dispatch center for help, and climbing rangers who were on a routine patrol near the lower saddle moved to respond to their SOS. Despite their proximity and quick response, it was unfortunately too late to save Mary. When the rangers arrived at the location, they found Mary unresponsive, and every attempt to revive her failed. Despite wearing a helmet during the climb, it did nothing to protect her from the impact of falling from such a steep height. With no other options, the rangers pronounced her dead after consulting with the park's medical director. She was then evacuated by helicopter to the coroner's office for official confirmation of her demise. Meanwhile, other staff members from Jackson Hole Mountain Guides who responded to the scene escorted Mary's climbing partner down from the upper saddle to the lower saddle and eventually to a trailhead on the valley floor. Mary's death was shocking for one major reason. Earlier that year, she had successfully climbed to the summit of Mount Kilimanjaro, the highest mountain in Africa. This climb required her to cover a distance of almost 20,000 feet, a feat that many who attempt it do not manage to complete. It was evident that Mary was an experienced climber who knew her craft well and should have had no trouble navigating the Grand Teton. When news of Mary's demise reached her family and friends, they were shocked and devastated, given their awareness of her climbing skills. Her brother John Conley expressed their disbelief, stating that it was unimaginable that this could happen. He also described his sister as a very advanced climber and an all-around fitness buff. Away from climbing, Mary was a devoted and loving daughter, wife, mother, and sister. She was also actively involved in the family's Santa Fe tag agency in Edmond, and she participated in various charitable activities. To her friends, Mary was dependable, always showing up to help whenever they were in a bind, regardless of any discomfort it might cause her. She was eventually laid to rest on the 22nd of July at an interment ceremony attended by her friends and family. On September was January 2nd, 2001, in Banff National Park, Alberta. Frances Frost, a 30-year-old artist and dancer, decided to go on a solo cross-country ski near Lake Minnewanka. She was recovering from a cold and eager to enjoy the outdoors again. The Cascade Fire Road was a trail she knew well, and she felt confident heading out alone. Frances grew up in Edmonton and had a passion for art and adventure. She danced with Ballet North and later worked as a dancer in residence at the Banff Center. When not performing, she was a guide at Kananaskis Provincial Park, often spending her days in nature. That afternoon, Frances left Banff at noon, excited for her ski trip. Locals saw her on the trail, enjoying the winter day. However, hidden in the trees nearby was a cougar that had been acting unusually bold. Earlier that day, wildlife officials had received reports of a cougar attacking a dog near a home in Banff. Another sighting involved a woman and her dog being followed near Middle Springs. These incidents indicated the animal was searching for food and becoming less wary of humans. Frances had been skiing for about 90 minutes and was almost back to her car, just 300 meters away. The cougar had been following her silently, waiting for the right moment. As she passed by, it suddenly attacked. Frances fought back, but she was alone, and the cougar overpowered her. A group of skiers found the aftermath shortly after. The cougar had left the scene but soon returned to its prey. At that moment, Parks Canada wardens arrived and acted quickly to stop the animal. Officials later confirmed it was the same cougar involved in the earlier incidents. This attack was the first and remains the only fatal cougar attack in Alberta's history. That evening, Frances's parents, Laura and Ed Frost, received the devastating news. They had already seen a newspaper headline about a 30-year-old woman being attacked by a cougar in Banff and tried to contact Frances. Their worst fears were confirmed when a police officer arrived at their door. Laura later spoke about the shock of realizing her daughter was the victim. The loss was overwhelming, but Frances' parents did not place blame on the animal. They understood it was following its instincts, driven by hunger and survival. In the days after the tragedy, Laura, a scientist with connections to wildlife experts, sought to understand what might have caused the attack. Research revealed that the cougar may have been affected by several factors. That winter, a food shortage had pushed wildlife closer to human areas. Parks Canada had been relocating elk to manage their population, which may have disrupted the natural balance. Some experts also wondered if Frances' recent recovery from illness might have made her seem like an easier target, as predators in the wild can sometimes sense vulnerability. Even with these theories, the attack was highly unusual. Cougars typically avoid humans, and many questions remained unanswered. Why had this particular cougar followed Frances? Why had it been so aggressive? These questions left wildlife experts puzzled. Frances's family and friends mourned the loss of a vibrant, creative woman who embraced life with energy and passion. Despite their pain, her parents found solace in knowing she had been doing what she loved, enjoying nature. In her memory, they continued to ski the Cascade Fire Road each year, honoring the place she cherished. Over time, Banff has made efforts to manage wildlife interactions. Cougar sightings still occur, but officials continue to monitor and address risks near human areas. Frances's story serves as a reminder of how unpredictable nature can be. In January 2021, on the 20th anniversary of Frances's passing, Laura reflected on what might have been different if Frances hadn't been alone that day. These thoughts lingered, but there were no definitive answers. Today, Parks Canada remains focused on balancing wildlife and human activity in the park. Frances Frost's story is remembered not only for its tragedy, but also for her adventurous spirit and deep connection to the outdoors, a life lived with passion and creativity. It was January 10th, 2020, in Banff National Park. Dr. Laura Kosakowski, a 34-year-old family doctor from Canmore, set out on a backcountry skiing trip with her husband, Adam Campbell, and their friend, Kevin Hertjas. Laura, known as Kos by those close to her, was an experienced skier with avalanche training. The group had carefully planned this trip for months, trusting their skills despite the challenging conditions. Laura had completed over 80 backcountry trips in 3 years. Adam, a professional ski mountaineer, was familiar with extreme conditions, and Kevin was a certified mountain guide with extensive avalanche training. They were well prepared and aware of the risks. That morning, they headed toward the Hector South area along Highway 93 North, a spot that had become popular among skiers. Fresh snow had fallen the week before, and temperatures were around -15 degrees Celsius. Avalanche risks were moderate below the tree line but more hazardous at higher elevations. Despite this, they moved forward, equipped with avalanche beacons and emergency supplies. Their morning went as planned. They carefully assessed the snow conditions and made their way down the slopes. By mid-morning, they decided on one last run before finishing for the day. Adam and Kevin went ahead while Laura prepared for her descent. At 11:30 a.m., Laura skied down the 400-meter slope, moving smoothly through the fresh powder. Adam, wanting a better view, stepped onto a ridge. As he shifted slightly, the ground beneath him suddenly collapsed. In seconds, a massive slab of snow broke loose, rushing down the slope. Adam screamed to warn Laura about the avalanche. Laura, still skiing, had no time to react before the powerful wave of snow swept her away. Adam and Kevin immediately started searching, their eyes scanning the avalanche path. But the snow was too heavy, burying the slope in an instant. They activated their avalanche beacons and began searching for her signal. The terrain was steep, and the deep snow made progress slow and exhausting. After several tense minutes, they located Laura's beacon and started digging. The snow was packed densely, making each movement difficult. After 45 minutes, they reached Laura, buried under nearly 4 meters of snow, cold and unresponsive. Kevin attempted cardiopulmonary resuscitation, but she showed no signs of recovery. They wrapped her in extra clothing and a bivy bag, waiting for rescue. By 1:30 p.m., a Parks Canada helicopter arrived to airlift them out. Laura was rushed to Foothills Medical Center in Calgary, her body temperature dangerously low. Despite a faint heartbeat, she never regained consciousness and passed away the next day from internal injuries caused by the avalanche. Her loss devastated her family, friends, and the close-knit skiing community. Adam, heartbroken, described Laura as loving, passionate, and full of life. He shared how she had been his source of strength, teaching him the true meaning of joy and adventure. Laura's mother was on a flight home from Colombia when the news broke. Upon landing, Adam connected her to Laura for a final goodbye. Despite their experience, several factors contributed to the tragedy. Adam later reflected on underestimating the specific dangers of the slope, where fresh snow, wind, and terrain made the area more unstable than they had anticipated. Laura, known for her careful approach to safety, had not worn a helmet that day, something Adam deeply regretted. Though there was no way to know if it would have changed the outcome, he couldn't help but wonder if it might have made a difference. The mountains are unpredictable, no matter how skilled or prepared one may be. Adam's reflections emphasize the importance of constant vigilance, communication, and never underestimating the risks. Laura Kosakowski was a dedicated doctor, a loving wife, and an adventurer who embraced life with passion and resilience. She left behind a lasting impact on those who knew and loved her. But lingering questions remain. What if they had chosen a different route? What if the avalanche had been smaller or they had taken extra precautions? Could things have turned out differently if Laura had worn her helmet? These unanswered questions continue to weigh on those left behind, as they remember the woman who brought so much love and light into their lives. It was April 18th, 2024, in the remote wilderness of Banff National Park. Rob Copolillo, a seasoned mountain guide, was leading a backcountry skiing expedition in the Canadian Rockies. At 54, Rob had dedicated his life to the mountains, guiding, teaching, and inspiring others. He wasn't just known for his expertise, but also his humor, kindness, and passion for the outdoors. That day, Rob was leading a small group of skiers near Christian Peak, close to the Alberta-British Columbia border. The landscape was breathtaking yet unpredictable. Beneath the snow, hidden dangers lurked, including deep crevasses, cracks in the glacier that could open suddenly. Rob, always cautious, took every safety measure. He and his team carefully checked the terrain, ensuring a safe route forward. But despite his experience, nature proved unpredictable. Without warning, the ground beneath him collapsed. Rob fell into a deep crevasse, vanishing into the icy depths. His team acted immediately, trying to reach him while calling for help. The distress signal was relayed to Icefall Lodge, a remote outpost near the Lyle icefield. Within hours, Parks Canada dispatched a rescue team by helicopter, flying 3 specialists to the site. By the time they arrived, Rob's group had managed to pull him from the crevasse and were administering first aid. However, Rob was in critical condition. He had been trapped in freezing temperatures for nearly an hour, and his injuries were severe. The rescue team worked urgently to stabilize him before airlifting him to Lake Louise. From there, a shock trauma air rescue service, STARS Air Ambulance, transported him to Foothills Medical Center in Calgary, 2 hours away. Despite the efforts of medical professionals, Rob never regained consciousness. The harsh conditions and injuries had taken too great a toll. The news devastated the mountaineering community. Rob wasn't just a guide. He was a mentor and friend. His company, Veta Mountain Guides, was widely respected, and he had contributed immensely to the climbing and skiing world. He co-authored the Mountain Guide Manual and wrote extensively about outdoor safety, sharing his expertise with aspiring adventurers. Those who knew him described him as larger than life. Brian Lazar, a fellow guide and close friend, recalled that Rob wasn't just a mountain guy, and that it was just a small part of who he was. His infectious humor and vivid storytelling made him unforgettable, drawing people in and making the mountains feel less intimidating. Rob's greatest love, however, was his family. He was married to Rebecca Yarmouth, and together they had 2 sons, Dominic and Luca. Losing him was heartbreaking for them. He had always balanced his love for adventure with his role as a devoted husband and father. Following his passing, the mountaineering community rallied to support his family. A GoFundMe page was set up and quickly raised thousands of dollars. Messages of love and gratitude poured in from around the world, reflecting the deep impact Rob had on so many lives. Despite all precautions, the accident was unavoidable. Rob understood the unpredictability of the mountains, yet that never stopped him from exploring. He lived by a simple philosophy: embrace the adventure, push limits, and enjoy the journey. He encouraged others to do the same, reminding them that life is meant to be lived fully. His wife, Rebecca, had once questioned why he would go to a place where one could be there one moment and gone the next. For Rob, the answer was clear. The mountains weren't just about risk, they were where he felt most alive. People may wonder, what if he had been just a few steps away from that crevasse? What if help had arrived sooner? Those questions will always remain. But one thing is certain, Rob's legacy endures. The lessons he taught, the laughter he shared, and the lives he touched will continue to echo through the peaks he loved so much. On a brisk April morning in 1993, Donna Spangler, a 58-year-old fitness instructor from Durango, Colorado, stood with her husband, Robert M. Spangler, on a steep trail in Grand Canyon National Park. The air was crisp and their anticipation hung in the air. Little did Donna know, this expedition would be her last. Donna and Robert's relationship showed signs of strain for some time. Despite being together for 3 years, their marriage was marred by disagreement and discontent. They met in April 1989, exactly 4 years before Donna's tragic demise. The following year, they exchanged vows, but their marriage was far from perfect. Their lack of shared interest became increasingly apparent as time went on. Donna, a fitness and health lover, spent her days teaching aerobics at the Durango Health Club. Meanwhile, a country music DJ, Robert, found peace in the great outdoors, often going on solo hiking trips to clear his mind. The spring of 1993 brought a glimmer of hope as the couple planned to hike the Grand Canyon together. It seemed like an opportunity to reconnect and rediscover the bond that had brought them together in the first place. With eagerness in their hearts, they set out for their adventure. Arriving at the Grand Canyon, Robert chose the Grand View Trail for their hike. It was a popular route offering breathtaking views and challenging terrain. Horseshoe Mesa, their intended destination, lay approximately 2,600 feet below the rim. Excitement coursed through Donna as they began their descent. Donna couldn't shake the unease that had settled in her gut as they hiked. She wasn't an experienced hiker, and the rugged land of the trail made her nervous. Still, she pressed on, wanting to make the most of their time together. Their journey led them to a secluded spot near the Last Chance Mine, where they decided to camp for the night. It was a moment of peace and tranquility despite the chaos of their troubled relationship. But the calm was shattered the following day when tragedy struck. In a moment of madness, Robert made a decision that would change their lives forever. Standing face to face with Donna on the trail, he succumbed to his darkest impulses and pushed her over the edge. The world seemed to stand still as Donna tumbled down the cliffside, her screams slowly getting lost in the wind as she fell further down. In an instant, she was gone. Shock and disbelief washed over Robert as he realized what he had done. Frantically, he scrambled down the trail to where Donna's lifeless body lay, her injuries too severe to comprehend. Panic gripped him as he struggled to come to terms with the enormity of his actions. He knew there would be no turning back from this moment, no way to undo the irreparable damage he had caused. In a daze, Robert went to the National Park Service backcountry office, his mind reeling with guilt and regret. He recounted a fabricated tale of Donna's accidental fall, desperate to evade the consequences of his heinous crime. But the truth would not stay hidden for long. Rangers soon discovered discrepancies in Robert's story, leading them to suspect foul play. As they delved deeper into the circumstances surrounding Donna's death, a chilling pattern began to emerge. It seemed that Robert M. Spangler was not the loving husband he appeared to be. In a shocking turn of events, Robert confessed to not only Donna's murder, but also to the deaths of his first wife, Nancy, and their 2 children, Susan and David, nearly 15 years earlier. His confession shocked people, leaving friends and family reeling from the revelation of his dark past. As the details of Robert's crimes came to light, the community struggled to reconcile the image of the man they thought they knew with the cold-blooded killer he had become. His actions shattered lives and left behind a trail of devastation that would haunt those who knew him for years to come. In the end, justice was served, but the scars left by Robert's actions would never fully heal. Donna Spangler, a beloved mother, grandmother, and friend, was gone, her life cut short by the very person who had sworn to love and protect her. What if Donna had listened to her instincts and refused to accompany Robert on their ill-fated hike? Would she still be alive today and still be with him? Regardless of all these questions, the truth remained the same, and that Donna's death was unfair. In the midsummer heat of June 2004, the Grand Canyon National Park bustled with activity as tourists flocked to experience its breathtaking landscapes. Among them was Timothy Clam, a 25-year-old from Illinois. Timothy's journey began innocently enough as he sought to embark on a helicopter tour of the canyon. Eager to secure the best view possible, he repeatedly attempted to book the coveted front seat on a Papillon helicopter's air tour. However, the prime tourist season meant the flights were fully booked, leaving Timothy to stay until an opportunity presented itself. It wasn't until the following day that Timothy's persistence paid off, granting him access to the coveted position he had long wished for. As he sat among his fellow passengers, the anticipation of the adventure ahead mingled with an undercurrent of unease, unnoticed by all but Timothy himself. The safety video played, its instructions showing safety measures to the excited passengers. But for Timothy, the video held a different significance, a sign of the events to come. His eyes, fixed upon the screen, absorbed every detail with a quiet intensity, as if preparing for an inevitable reckoning. With the pre-flight routine complete, the helicopter lifted from the pad, its rotors slicing through the air. As the landscape below receded into a patchwork of earth and sky, Timothy's gaze turned inward, a storm gathering behind his calm exterior. Approximately 38 minutes into the tour, Timothy's resolve solidified into action as the helicopter traced the canyon's rim. With a sudden chilling moment, he unbuckled his seatbelt and reached for the door, his movements deliberate and unhurried. For a fleeting moment, the world seemed to hold its breath as Timothy stood on the door, his gaze fixed upon the land below. Maria Langer, the pilot entrusted with the safety of her passengers, watched in disbelief as Timothy's intentions became clear. With a swift motion, she lunged forward, her hands outstretched desperately to prevent the unthinkable. But Timothy, consumed by his thoughts, was beyond reach, his grip on reality slipping away with each passing moment. And there, without hesitation, he plunged 4,000 feet to his death. For those left behind, the shock of his actions echoed through the cabin. The passengers were left speechless because of the sudden events that unfolded before their very eyes. In the aftermath of Timothy's tragic leap, the helicopter teetered on the edge of chaos, its balance disrupted by the sudden loss of weight. Passengers, gripped by terror, clung to one another as Maria Langer fought to regain control, her hands steady despite the turmoil raging within. As the helicopter touched down near White's Butte, its occupants emerged shaken but unharmed, their minds reeling from the events that had unfolded in the skies above. For Maria Langer, the memory of that tragic day would haunt her for the rest of her days. For Timothy Clam, his final act of defiance shows the uncertainties hidden within oneself. Neither did his closest friends or family know that he longed to seek help for what he was fighting against inside his mind, only for him to decide that his last resort to end his misery was to take his own life. In the days that followed, authorities combed the canyon for traces of Timothy's passing, their efforts hindered by the terrain and massive expanse of the landscape. Despite their best efforts, no sign of Timothy could be found, leaving only questions in their wake. What if his final moments had been spent embracing the world's beauty rather than seeking escape from it? As people gather around to find more questions than answers to his passing, we are sure of one thing: Timothy has already found peace from what he was going through. No matter where he has already escaped the misery he has been battling. George Mancuso was a simple man with a love for adventure and a passion for photography. George hailed from the busy streets of New York City, but his heart belonged to the wilderness of the Grand Canyon. George's journey into the canyon began long before his disappearance. As a child, he dreamed of exploring its vast expanses and capturing its beauty through his camera lens. He spent hours examining the canyon's photographs, imagining himself standing amidst its towering cliffs and winding rivers. As he grew older, George's dream became a reality. He went on countless expeditions into the canyon, each more thrilling than the last. He hiked its trails, rafted its rivers, and camped beneath its star-studded sky. George felt more connected to the canyon and its beauty with each adventure. But George's love for the canyon was not without its dangers. In 1999, he suffered a severe knee injury while hiking in the depths of the canyon. The injury left him bedridden for months, but it only strengthened his determination to explore further. Despite the pain, George was determined to continue his desire to capture the essence of the canyon through his photographs. In August 2001, George set out on his final expedition into the canyon. He was accompanied by his friend Linda Bramer, a fellow adventurer who loves the outdoors. Together, they planned to hike to the confluence of the Little Colorado River Gorge and Salt Trail Canyon, a remote and rarely visited area of the canyon. The journey started like any other, with George and Linda quickly navigating the winding trails and cliffs of the canyon. They laughed and joked as they walked deeper into the wilderness, unaware of the dangers ahead. As they neared their destination, dark clouds began to gather overhead. George and Linda knew that monsoon season was in full swing, but they were confident that they could outrun any storms that came their way. Little did they know, nature had other plans. Suddenly the sky opened without warning, unleashing a torrential downpour upon the canyon. The rain fell in sheets, turning the desert landscape into a muddy, treacherous terrain. George and Linda knew they had to find shelter fast, but there was nowhere to hide. As they scrambled to find higher ground, they heard the distant roar of rushing water. It was the sound of a flash flood barreling down the narrow gorge towards them with unstoppable force. Panic set in as George and Linda realized they were trapped, with nowhere to run and nowhere to hide. The flood hit with a deafening roar, sweeping George and Linda off their feet and into the raging waters below. They clung to each other desperately, fighting against the current as it carried them downstream. Rocks tumbled, trees crashed, and the once peaceful waters turned into a churning maelstrom of destruction. George and Linda battled the elements for hours, their strength waning with each passing moment. They tried to stay afloat to keep their heads above water, but it was a losing battle. In the end, they were no match for the floods of the canyon. When the flood finally subsided, George and Linda were nowhere to be found. Search teams scoured the canyon for days, combing its land in search of any sign of their whereabouts. Helicopters circled overhead, their searchlights cutting through the darkness as they scanned the canyon walls for any trace of the missing hikers. But despite their best efforts, George and Linda remained a mystery. Their families were left to grapple with the agonizing uncertainty of their loss, clinging to the hope that they would one day be found. As the days passed and eventually turned into weeks and months, theories about what had happened to George and Linda emerged. Some believed they had been swept away by the flood and drowned, their bodies lost forever in the depths. Others speculated that they had managed to find shelter somewhere in the wilderness, waiting to be rescued. However, as time passed and no sign of George and Linda surfaced, the truth became increasingly apparent. They were gone, victims of a cruel and unforgiving landscape that had claimed so many lives before them. And though their bodies were never found, their memories would forever roam the Grand Canyon, lost but never forgotten. It was a mild, sunny day on June 6, 2015, when Jenny Bennett set out for another solo hike in the Greenbrier area of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Jenny, a 62-year-old avid hiker from Sylva, North Carolina, was well known for her love of the mountains. She had a deep connection to the Smokies, a place she described as her favorite in the world. Jenny's passion for hiking started years ago. Born in Arlington, Virginia, she moved to Knoxville in 1983 and joined the Smoky Mountain Hiking Club. Her confidence and skill grew rapidly, especially after a challenging off-trail hike to Tourist Bunyan with her then-husband Chris Hebb. Jenny often hiked with legendary off-trail hikers like Charlie Klabunde and Al Watson, which secured her reputation as a fearless explorer. Jenny's life took her away from the Smokies for 2 decades. She lived in Gloucester, Massachusetts with her longtime companion Bob Parley. However, their split in 2009 brought her back to the mountains. She moved to Brevard, North Carolina, and later to Sylva. Her return marked the beginning of 5 years of intense off-trail hiking, both solo and with friends. Jenny documented her adventures on her WordPress blog, Endless Streams and Forests, and published 2 books, including a mystery novel set in the Smokies titled Murder at the Jump-Off. Despite her extensive hiking experience, Jenny's final years were marked by personal struggles. She developed a severe knee problem that caused her knee to dislocate during hikes. Despite the pain, she continued her adventures, often forcing her knee back into place to complete her treks. In early 2015, the passing of her mentor, Charlie Klabunde, deeply affected her. She organized a hike to disperse his ashes, but had to turn back due to her knee giving out once again. This setback weighed heavily on her. By March 31, 2015, Jenny decided to leave North Carolina and move to St. Johnsbury, Vermont, to be closer to her sister. She sold her house, packed her belongings, and planned to move on June 1st. The prospect of leaving the Smokies brought mixed emotions. Jenny was excited about the move, but also saddened by the thought of leaving the mountain she cherished. Her last blog posts on May 24th and 27 reflected this bittersweet sentiment. On either May 30th or May 31st, 2015, Jenny returned to the Lester Prong area, a place she had visited countless times. This time she went alone. Her goal was to revisit her beloved trails one last time before the move. However, she never made it back. Jenny was reported missing on June 6, 2015, and her car was found at the Porter's Flat trailhead the next day. A search and rescue team from the National Park Service discovered Jenny's body on June 8, 2015. She was found sitting in Porter's Creek, about 4 miles up the trail, with her head resting on rocks. The autopsy report concluded that she had died of environmental hypothermia due to cold exposure from partial submersion in the creek. Bruises on her right hip and elbow indicated a fall, but she had no internal injuries. The report also revealed a toxic level of diphenhydramine, an antihistamine, in her system. This pointed towards a possible intentional overdose, suggesting she might have taken the medication to end her life. Jenny's death shocked the hiking community. Many speculated about her final moments. Did she fall into the creek accidentally and succumb to hypothermia? Or did she intentionally take her life by ingesting a large amount of diphenhydramine? Her brother Peter acknowledged that the exact events leading up to her death would likely remain a mystery. He took comfort in knowing that Jenny died in the place she loved most. On August 31, 2015, the National Park Service issued a press release confirming the findings of the autopsy. The Sevier County Medical Examiner's Office concluded that Jenny's death was caused by environmental hypothermia, with the high level of diphenhydramine in her blood being a significant contributing factor. The report described her final moments in detail. Jenny was found in a sitting position in the icy creek, her head resting on rocks, with bruises consistent with a fall but no serious injuries. The high concentration of diphenhydramine suggested she might have taken an overdose, leading her body to shut down before she succumbed to hypothermia. Jenny's passing was a significant loss to the hiking community. To honor her memory, the Smoky Mountains Hiking Club organized a memorial hike on September 13, 2015. Participants gathered at the Porters Creek trailhead and hiked to the SMHC cabin site. Peter Bennett, Jenny's brother, dispersed a portion of her cremains at the cabin site. The event included a celebration of life service at the Greenbrier Picnic Pavilion, where friends and fellow hikers shared stories and memories of Jenny. The following day, a smaller group of hikers, including Peter, went off-trail to Lester Prong to disperse more of Jenny's cremains at the site known as Charlie's Rock, where Charlie Clabunday's ashes had been scattered. This final act was a tribute to Jenny and her love for the Smokies. Jenny Bennett's life and death left a lasting impact on those who knew her and the hiking community. She was a fearless explorer who took on challenges that few others would dare. Her adventures, documented in her blog and books, continue to inspire current and future lovers of the Smokies. Susan Clements, a 53-year-old auditor from Cincinnati, Ohio, was last seen in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park on September 25, 2018. Susan was hiking with her 20-year-old daughter near Klingman's Dome, a popular spot known for its breathtaking views. The pair had been enjoying a few days of hiking, tackling trails that were longer and more strenuous than the Forney Ridge Trail, which they were on that day. This trail, considered moderate, runs for 1.8 miles with an elevation change of about 400 feet. On that afternoon, they were returning from Andrews Bald, a scenic grassy area. When they were about a quarter mile from Andrews Bald, Susan's daughter decided to hike ahead to Klingman's Dome Tower and planned to meet her mother back at the parking lot. The daughter reached the tower and, after spending some time there, returned to the parking lot. Susan never showed up. Panicked, her daughter immediately alerted park officials, and a search for Susan began. As night fell, the park staff, experienced in dealing with missing people in such vast terrain, knew they had to act quickly. Susan was an experienced hiker, well-versed in the challenges of the trails, yet she had vanished in an area teeming with natural hazards. Initial searches covered the trails, focusing on the path Susan was supposed to take. However, no sign of her was found. The search for Susan quickly escalated into a massive operation. It involved 175 trained personnel from 5 states and over 50 organizations, including helicopters, drones, and K-9 units. They combed through more than 500 miles of trails, but dense vegetation and rugged terrain made the search extremely difficult. The area around Klingman's Dome, though popular, is intersected by many trails and surrounded by thick forests, which can disorient even seasoned hikers. As days passed, the search expanded beyond the trails. Jelena Campbell, a spokesperson for the park, explained that most people picture the park via the trails but do not understand the true difficulty of the landscape off-trail. It's easy to miss a turn or intersection, especially in the foggy, rainy, and dark conditions that Susan encountered. By the weekend, the search intensified with more personnel and specialized equipment. Despite the efforts, they faced numerous challenges, including heavy rain that fell in the initial days of the search, which hindered efforts to find tracks or scents. The thick, rocky landscape made it almost impossible to locate any clues. Searchers systematically cleared all trails and moved to off-trail areas, focusing on downhill drainages where disoriented individuals often end up. On October 3rd, after a week of relentless searching, Susan's body was found in incredibly thick vegetation down the steep Huggins Creek drainage in Swain County, North Carolina. This location was about 2 miles west of the Klingman's Dome parking lot and 3/4 of a mile south of the Appalachian Trail. Retrieving Susan's body was a daunting task. The terrain was so rough that a Tennessee Army National Guard helicopter was needed for the extraction. Park officials confirmed that no foul play was suspected, and the cause of death was determined to be hypothermia. Susan was found wearing green and black clothing, which made it even more challenging for search teams to spot her in the dense forest. The discovery of Susan's body brought a mixture of relief and sorrow to her family and the search teams. It provided some closure, knowing what had happened after days of uncertainty. Her family expressed their gratitude to the National Park Service and all the agencies involved in the search. They appreciated the tireless efforts of the searchers, pilots, drone operators, dog trackers, and rescuers.
On Saturday, June 5, 2021, 26-year-old Cassie Brown, an avid canyoneer and beloved guide for the Zion Adventure Company, went on a solo canyoneering trip in Zion National Park. In the past, she had often joined other local canyoneers in trying out different terrains. Other times, she had also gone with her mother, who was a fellow enthusiast. However, she chose to go alone on this particular day for unknown reasons. Given Cassie's love for the hobby and her known dedication to safety, her trip was expected to be just another normal one, filled with the thrill of exploration. However, when she stepped out that morning, none of her family could have imagined it would be the last time they would see her alive. As she made her way through the trip, Brown reached a canyon that many considered easy to navigate. Just as she descended off it, she faced a challenge she hadn't anticipated. Her rope, a trusted lifeline that had secured previous descents, unexpectedly got stuck on a rappel. She repeatedly tried to shake it free from the rope, but it refused to budge. At this point, she was at a crossroads of choice. She could either wait for people to find her or try to ascend the rope to her previous route. But since there was no guarantee anyone else would traverse the canyon that day, the prospect of spending a long night trapped halfway down seemed not to appeal to her. Brown then decided to take the bold option of ascending the rope. Regrettably, her choice proved to be ill-fated. While ascending the rope, it unexpectedly gave way at some point. This sudden release propelled her into a harrowing free fall of approximately 50 to 80 feet, ending with her body crashing mercilessly onto the unforgiving rocky terrain below. The impact instantly inflicted her with multiple severe injuries, including broken bones in different parts of her body. An hour after Brown's fall, another group of canyon explorers stumbled upon her abandoned climbing gear. To them, it clearly indicated that a hiker had run into some trouble somewhere within the canyon. Taking the initiative, a member of the party was sent back to inform Zion's search and rescue team, who immediately mobilized their resources and expertise to locate and aid Brown. As the search for Brown intensified, the search and rescue team took decisive measures to ensure her swift rescue, even though it was initially unclear where she had fallen. They temporarily closed off several surrounding hiking routes vital for accessing the canyon, such as the Narrows, Mystery, and Orderville canyons. Even popular stops like the Temple of Sinawava shuttle stop and Riverside Walk were also closed off during the search period. A rescue helicopter was also dispatched to further facilitate the search. However, the canyon's sheer steepness and narrow confines prevented it from reaching Brown's location. After a few hours, medical personnel finally managed to reach Brown, who was lying on the ground, barely alive. They began administering initial treatments and preparation for moving her out of the canyon into the hospital. But sadly, this was a futile effort. Within moments of their arrival, she passed away, succumbing to the injuries she had sustained after her fall. Brown's body was later recovered from the canyon on Sunday evening and taken to the morgue. An investigation was opened to determine the exact cause of the accident, although foul play was not suspected. Following her death, Brown received many tributes from friends and other canyoneers who frequented Zion National Park. One person said she always brought a valued and skilled perspective to the limestone slots of the Grand Canyon and was a masterful practitioner in the art of canyoning. Another person remarked that she was dedicated to service and sharing her knowledge and love of the outdoors with others. Tuesday, November 20th, 2022, a 33-year-old man and his 31-year-old wife, a married couple, embarked on a permitted 16-mile journey through the Narrows in Zion National Park. This hike typically involves wading through the chilly waters of the Virgin River as it winds its way through an expansive slot canyon. In this area, cell phone reception is virtually non-existent because of its distance from cell towers and the solid rock and earth forming a canyon. also absorb or weaken any signals that managed to penetrate through. While this might have seemed daunting to many, the couple definitely didn't feel this way about the hike. As planned, they quickly covered the miles in good time. However, as nightfall approached, their situation took a turn for the worse. Despite starting the hike with temperatures at a relatively comfortable 49 degrees, the weather unexpectedly plummeted to dangerously low levels. Shockingly, it continued to drop steadily, even plunging below the freezing point. The cold soon proved overwhelming for the couple as they made their way along the hiking trail. It was even worsened by their lack of proper protective gear to ward off the chill. Before long, they began exhibiting symptoms consistent with hypothermia. This condition occurs when the body's temperature drops below normal levels because it's losing heat faster than it can generate it. Sometime during the night, they decided to set up camp and wait until morning instead of pressing on with their hike. They chose a spot approximately 1.5 miles from the end of their intended route. If they had forged ahead just a little more, they would have been able to get help, as there were facilities at the end of the trail. However, they did not, and by morning, their condition had deteriorated further from the previous night. At this point, the woman seemed worse off than the man. Seeing his wife's condition, the man, who was also severely injured, summoned the last of his strength to continue the journey alone and seek help for his wife. Eventually, he encountered park visitors who swiftly came to his aid and notified the authorities. Over 20 search and rescue team members were promptly mobilized and rushed to the couple's stopping point. Upon their arrival, the search and rescue team discovered the man receiving assistance from fellow hikers. He was promptly transported to the Zion Emergency Operations Center for urgent medical treatment. Further along the trail, they located his wife near the Virgin River, where she lay unresponsive. Despite efforts to resuscitate her by one of the hikers, she did not respond. Tragically, it was soon confirmed that she had passed away. An investigation into the cause of the woman's death was initiated, although it was ultimately presumed to have been caused by the effects of hypothermia. To this date, the couple's names are still not known to the public, possibly due to privacy reasons. The Landing Trail has been a beloved destination in Zion National Park since it opened to the public in the summer of 1926. Renowned for its awe-inspiring views, the trail draws in hundreds of thousands of hikers annually, all eager to tackle the challenge it presents. Even under ideal conditions, navigating the Angel's Landing Trail requires remarkable coordination. The ascent is long and steady, with an elevation gain of nearly 1,500 feet. As a hiker makes the climb, they may experience dehydration, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke as they experience more sun rays. There is also no water available on the entire route, making it compulsory for every climber to carry at least a quart or two of water if they are to survive the hike. The ultimate challenge comes when climbers reach the last half mile of the trek. At this point, they must continue hiking by holding on to the chains that run parallel to the trail, or else they risk falling into the orange sandstone. Despite the trail's reputation for its challenging terrain and potential risks, 45-year-old Tate Ryan Volino from Osprey, Florida, decided to hike up the trail like countless others before him. On March 3, 2017, he began the trek, which is approximately a 5.4-mile round trip on the eastern edge of Refrigerator Canyon. Rather than joining a group hike, which often provides a sense of security and assistance in times of trouble, Volino opted for a solo expedition. His decision to go solo suggests that he was an experienced hiker, although it was never confirmed. At some point during the climb, Volino fell off one of the higher points on the trail, plummeting straight down to his death. There was no one with him when it happened, so it was unclear what led to his fall. Shortly after, a couple of hikers in the vicinity discovered Volino lying sprawled out motionless on the rocky terrain. They quickly contacted Zion Park's authorities about the situation they had encountered. Thereafter, personnel were dispatched to secure the area, and closed the trail from other hikers while the park's search and rescue team recovered the body of Volino. The trail was reopened later that day after Volino's body had been taken away. An investigation carried out into Volino's untimely death revealed a high visibility of trauma on his body. This was consistent with injuries sustained from a high fall, although the exact height he fell from remained unknown. His death was later characterized as a tragic hiking accident, as reported by the park authorities. It also marked the 15th death on the Angel's Landing Trail and the first for that year. While he was alive, Volino was known as a prolific writer who once worked in the financial services sector. He wrote numerous golf-themed books and fictional works, including The Front Nine and Pull the Pin. Beyond his literary pursuits, he dedicated his time to volunteering with organizations such as Habitat for Humanity, demonstrating his commitment to serving his community. Additionally, he found solace and joy in kayaking whenever he could seize the opportunity. At the time of his tragic passing, he was survived by his loving wife and 2 sons, whose names were never disclosed.